anybody touches that mic. That's what it's about.
All right, then.
That's why if he's here, it's still good, right?
Yeah.
Great. So I'll just leave it where it is. They want to touch it.
All right. You want to get the door, Ronnie? That would be good. Thanks. Well, I tried to put together a very lengthy introduction of our new editor, but he hasn't been alive long enough to be actually to be able to put one of those together. But I did go on Google to find out a few things about John Meacham. He was born in Chattanooga in 1969. He went to college in Tennessee, College of the South. He went to work for the Chattanooga Times after graduating from college, and then to the Washington Monthly. He came to work in Newsweek in 1995. 3 years after he started in the Nation section, he ended up becoming the managing editor at the age of 29. A couple of weeks ago, John became the editor at the age of 37. We're very fortunate to have John as the new editor of the magazine. And before you come up, John, we've put together a new technology that we're going to launch on the website. You guys all saw the video player the other day, the new Bright Cove video player. You heard about heat mapping, where we watch people on the site and where they go. Mark Walters was talking about this. But now we've come up with a technology where we put people on our new video player and we can actually get inside of their heads to find out what they're thinking about while they're providing video. Should be a great opportunity for advertisers. So let's watch this before John comes up.
Just the vertical hole on the black and white piece.
I hate technology.
Distinguished John Meacham are here. They have recently taken on the reins at America's two most prestigious weekly news magazines, Time and Newsweek, respectively. What's the challenge? What's the excitement of this job in the context of what I just said? And analysis. Well, the state of the world is at once thrilling and daunting, because the state of the world is the best thing to do. We have to
be absolutely dedicated to telling people things they don't know but should, whether that is a conceptual scoop, as we say, an idea, like Fareed Zakaria's great cover of Why They Hate Us in the aftermath of September 11th, or whether it's Mike Isikoff on Monica Lewinsky, or any number of classic shoe leather scoops. Will we look old or will we look fresh, depending on, in a news cycle this fast, if we're out on Monday and you're out on Friday, and vice versa. My theory about this is I don't think we should be dogmatic at Newsweek about when we come out. And we've looked at this before, we'll keep looking at it. I think the news will probably break 50% of the time your way, 50% our way, and the chance to differentiate between the two is a good thing, I think, for both of us. I welcome that fight. I'm sure you do too. I think we're scrappier. I think we're hungrier. I don't know if you don't like that. I really do. For you, what's the biggest fear? If Homer were doing the Iliad now, he would podcast. So we have to embrace the technology and move on.
He should be scared. Ladies and gentlemen, John Meacham.
Now we know what you're doing all day, Osberg. That's good. How are y'all? Good to see you. Want to say first thank you
for enabling us to do what we do. I don't think that we say that enough. But if you all didn't do your work, we couldn't have the fun we have with pedophiles and crazy nuclear powers and all of that. So it says in the book of the Epistle to the Hebrews, it says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And that's always struck me as something that's quite relevant to someone who's in sales, because Lord knows you're living more on hope than most of us. So I admire very much, to be serious, very much the courage it takes to do what you all do. I think that to go out there and take risks in this way, particularly knowing us, is remarkable, and so thank you. I appreciate Mr. Osberg most of the time, and everything that y'all do for us. Want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do differently in the next, as we're calling it, the new regime. We hope it'll last a little longer than some regimes, but we'll see. And chiefly, one way to think about this version of Newsweek in this chapter is we're essentially putting out a daily newspaper, a daily news product on the web, with the magazine being kind of the Sunday edition, where that's where you get the better, not better, that's where you get the fuller treatment, that's where you get the tactile experience, obviously. But we understand completely that this is an hour-to-hour game. And if we want to be competitive in it, we have to be out there hour to hour. And so the first thing I did when I got this job, after praying for a while and thinking about drinking for even longer, though it is true, I should tell you all, I've been editor for 2 weeks, which is longer than some people in the 70s. So I beat Ed Kozner during one of his tours. I'm trying to decide whether I can tell that to Ed. I don't know. First thing I did was say that the line editors in the magazine, the people who are in charge of the departmental coverage, politics, foreign news, business, technology, the arts, science, all have to produce one story a day on the web. This is a case where quotas work. Quotas work almost in no part of life except this. It's sort of like don't ask, don't tell. It's a great philosophy for life except for gays in the military. So we understand that we have to be out there with fresh content as often as possible. And there's no ambiguity about that, no ambivalence about that on our part. The second thing I did was put the Newsweek.com page in the magazine. It's now, I think, the third page. You get the table of contents. We had to move my epistle to the readers up for legal reasons, but putting that page in so that people could go back and forth between the magazine and the website. I've already found that as I suspected, the popularity index is at once a blessing and a curse internally. People who are high on it think it's a wonderful idea. People whose stories are lower are a little more ambivalent about this. So we're, again, not unexpected. What we really have to do, and in some ways Rick Stengel left the field open for us in a way. When he took over in May, I guess, he talked a lot about how time was going to lead the conversation, was going to be about ideas, was going to be about analysis. And he repeatedly said, we're going to break our news on the web and analyze things in the magazine. I have almost exactly the opposite view. I think that we can provide magazine analysis hour to hour, whether it's in an audio minute or a video or a quick piece, but you have to create a sense of urgency and expectation around the Sunday paper, around the magazine. And if people don't feel they're going to get a big payoff when they pick up the magazine, then they aren't going to pick it up. And so in that way, I salute Time's philosophy because I think it helps us enormously. This idea that no one has broken news in print in years is wrong. Time hasn't broken news in print in years. That part's true. But we have. And one way to respond to that, frankly, if you're Time magazine, is to get out of the game. Make a virtue of it. Say you're The Economist. Put an elephant on the cover. So, in a sense, they're making a virtue of necessity. And I understand that, and I can see its logical consistency, and I might do the same thing. But we get to make a virtue of our virtues. And that is that we have, by hook and by crook, the best team of magazine reporters, arguably in history. This will not surprise you all, given the way I look. My goal in fashion has always been to look like what the president of the First Tennessee Bank in Chattanooga would have looked like in 1955. And my wife says that's the only fashion goal I've ever met. But if you look back, we're going to destroy this tape, but this is an editorial conversation. Henry Grunwald, the great editor of Time magazine, later ambassador to Austria, author, just died about 4 months ago. Wonderful man. He used to say that a news magazine with a scoop is like a prostitute with a baby. Something went wrong. What we've spent all our time trying to do is turn that logic upside down. We want to have scoops. We want to break news. We want people to feel a sense of urgency and a sense of necessity about picking up the magazine or knowing what Time and Newsweek have. We are fully aware that we can no longer take anything for granted. We cannot assume that people are going to come to us because we're Newsweek. We cannot assume that people are going to come to us because we have a certain columnist or a certain annual feature. We have to earn this week in and week out and hour by hour on the web, and we're fully cognizant of that. So how do you do that? I think you do it by surprising but not puzzling people. I think you have to put a frowny face on the cover as an O. I think when you have a nuclear power, when you have a nation go nuclear, you do something a little more serious and try to shake things up. Winston Churchill's best friend in British public life, his best friend once said, "When Winston's right, he's right, but when he's wrong, my God." So when we're right, and when we're wrong, it may be my God, but we're going to take the risks and try it. And I'd much rather return, as I said to Rick, I'd much rather return the family Lexus a little scratched up and dented than not at all. And so we may not always be happy, but we'll never be bored. I can promise you that. What we have to do, and what I'm telling our folks, and I suspect it's relevant for you all, is you will always find something when you open the magazine that you did not know but should. And it may be a conceptual idea. It may be, Howard Feynman on why the midterm's taking a certain turn. It may be Mike Isikoff on any number of topics. It may be Fareed thinking a certain way. It may be Anna thinking a certain way. It may be Sloan, God help us, thinking a certain way. But if you don't have something distinctive, then we're not going to survive, frankly. We'll go along on fumes for a decade or so, but I don't think ultimately if one were to either act as though we had a prior claim on people's attention, on the national audience, or sort of figure, well, if it interests us, it must interest them. It's not sustainable, I don't think. So as we enter our 74th year, are thinking more like a enterprising newspaper than we did before. To some extent, is that counterintuitive? Is the the Stengel vision for Time is we're going to give you the world in all its complexity and tell you what to think. Well, as Greg told you, I come from Tennessee, and we don't want people telling us what to think. We want to be equipped to know what to think ourselves and to come to form a sense of the world, particularly now, more so than, say, 10 years ago. But we don't want people to say, this is what to think. And insofar as they're going to wag their finger or rap on the blackboard, that's great, because that opens it up for us to do surprising stories, to have more fun. Fun is not a word you often think of with Time magazine. They're going, as you know, they're moving the schedule, and one part of that Charlie Rose appearance was Stengel said, well, I'm very excited about being out on Friday because people will, on Friday nights when they want to sit down and get to the news, they're going to open up Time. And I said, well, you know, where I come from, we open up bourbon on Friday night. So I don't really see. And believe me, I was the demographic who would have opened Time on Friday. And if I'm not, nobody is. So I'm confident there. I wouldn't worry too much about this timing thing. The news will break one way or the other, depending. And this idea that they're saying it to make it so, but it doesn't quite track. Well, we'll dominate the Sunday shows. You won't unless you have something. And the Sunday shows get our magazine, as you all may or may not know, at 5 a.m. anyway. So that's not a particularly relevant talking point, I don't think. What we have to do, and what we're doing, and have done well for years and years, I think, is explain things without being condescending and have a sense of humor, attempt to have a personality so that you know, when you go to your mailbox or you go to the web, you know the vocabulary into which you are about to enter. And again, it won't always be smooth and it'll be bumpy, but I promise you we'll try. We'll go down fighting before we go to a more milquetoast way of doing things. I think that's how we beat Time. I think that we do it with reporting, we do it with a sense of humor, and I don't mean ha ha ha, Kim Jong-il just went nuclear. Though the mushroom clouds in the glasses were pretty good. I was proud of that. But that's a pretty good example. If you can have a little bit of fun with the scariest story in the world, that's not bad. Wait till Armageddon. We're going to have a riotous time with that. The road to the apocalypse. I should announce now that for the newsstand people, Ernst will appreciate this as well. Next week we're going to do Was Jesus Autistic? Plus, what he means for your health. So we're not really, unless it works. It might. I used to say the new science of a gay Jesus, and then autism broke out, so I did this. Third thing I did, I guess. Lisa Miller, who's been the Society editor for a long time, is going to be the full-time religion writer and editor. I do think that there is an intense amount of interest in the country and something we can shed light on in the world of spirituality and faith, not just the Jesus diet, although that's a good one. But if you look at the web traffic, if you look at the newsstand numbers, there's clearly an intense amount of interest in that. A piece I did this summer on Billy Graham is still the #1 archive story. People want to come find it. So hard to go wrong with the big guy. Nissid Hajari, who's been the managing editor of Newsweek International, will become the foreign editor of Newsweek Domestic in a couple of weeks. So we're very excited about that, both in terms of his sense of the big stories, war and peace and terrorism, but also his sense of global business and his feel for the world economy, I think, will be a welcome voice at the table. We are in the search for a new business editor. We have somebody we're very excited about. We're hoping to seduce. I'm not, but someone else will just do the seduction. And are going to try to package more and more the business and technology coverage. Whether we actually call it business and tech, I'm not sure. We may. We're debating all of that internally. But one of the important things I wanted to try to do was, both for readers and for those of you who've been around a while, you know, we've thought in terms of sections for about 25 years. And the reason we went to sections was to break the power of sort of these old barons who used to be the religion, like Ken Woodward and others, who used to be the religion editor, and you'd have the books editor, and they had guaranteed space every week. And so that became that's like letting the inmates run the asylum. And so what Rick did was create this idea of super sections where you had society, lifestyle, nation, foreign. As the books have gotten a little smaller, and as the demands for the web have risen, it's occurred to me that we should think more in terms of coverage and ideas as opposed to being run by real estate, where the implication for our world, which this may be a little too detailed, but if an editor believes they only have 4 pages to fill, they're only going to think about those 4 pages, and if they don't know how much space they're going to get, and they could win more space with good ideas, they'll bring more ideas to the table. And so I'm trying to remove those inhibiting factors to get more conversations going and more sense of what people are really talking about in their own lives. We threw open we have a cover, traditionally I've had a cover meeting on Wednesdays. I changed the name of that to a futures meeting because there's a kind of an inhibition that came if you didn't have a fully baked cover proposal with a cover line and all of that. You felt a little embarrassed to throw something out there because all of it is high school, and so the Deirdre might have made fun of you, or well, she will. That's an inevitability, or I would frown, or Maynard used to say that he knows people would get very nervous when he would write something down when they were speaking, but usually it was go to dry cleaner. So what I wanted to try to do with that meeting was anyone can come at the on the edit side in the magazine, but the price of admission is I reserve the right to call on you and make you come up with a story idea. So it's a little like editorial Guantanamo, but wanted to try to keep keep the channels open and encourage people to just say what are their kids talking about, what's their spouse obsessed with. I mean, it can't hurt, and may just help. I know you all talked a good bit about the environment. I'm happy to. Michelle loves this memo. This is the greatest memo since George Kennan wrote a telegram from Moscow in 1946 that laid out the containment strategy for the Cold War. Not since George Kennan has there been a better memo. But I'm happy to talk to you all about that if you want. It's clearly something that's hugely important. I went out and spent a morning, it felt like a week, with Deirdre Imus, Mrs. Imus, who is intense. One would be, if one very long-suffering, obviously, but you begin to understand why he works so hard. No, she was great. She was great. But she's got this environmental center out there, and so it produced lots of good ideas that I think are in the Kennan memo. I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of living history for July 4th. It's something that Michael Beschloss and I have been kicking around for years, more years than we should probably admit. Years ago, decades ago, Arthur Schlesinger Sr., so not even Jr., who's now 87, created something called the Schlesinger Poll. That was a poll of scholars about who was the greatest president and ranking them and why they ranked them a certain way. I've asked Michael to reestablish that among presidential scholars, and we will do that poll and then poll real people about who they think the greatest was and the worst was, and compare. So you'll have the professor's view and the people's view, and kind of a battle of the bands to see who people think was the greatest president and worst president, and what that tells us about where we are now and what people want in terms of leadership. It's a perennially interesting question because presidential stock goes up and down as the years go by. Harry Truman was a great example. He left Washington and couldn't get arrested, basically, and is now a revered figure. George Herbert Walker Bush looks better and better the longer his son stays in office. It's a little like Billy Graham and Franklin Graham. The fathers look better and better as long as the sons are out there. So we will hopefully be able to chart that through the years and have a very interactive debate experience for readers both online, and I suspect the letters on that will be a great deal of fun. And attempt to both doing the presidents every year is a little tricky because Time does do very well with their oil painting. I mean, that's a great franchise now for them. But if we look at the 20th century, then as usual, we're sort of looking ahead, they're looking back. I think we'll be in good shape. There are other arguments you can have. There's this thing in history called counterfactualism. Sounds pretty glamorous, I know, which is better put, what if? What if we had lost at D-Day? What if Kennedy had let the nukes go in '62? So we're going to invite people to give us their favorite one of those, and everybody has one, at least, that they think, well, here's what would have happened if X, Y, or Z. One of the great ones, actually, is in Roosevelt almost died. He was shot at in December of 1932 and was nearly assassinated. And my friend here, Mr. Churchill, was run down and nearly killed on Fifth Avenue in a taxi cab in December of 1931 and barely survived. And one of the great questions is, what would World War II have looked like if both Roosevelt and Churchill were dead? I am, not only for the freedom and security of the world am I grateful that they survived, but I wrote a book called Franklin and Winston about 4 years ago. And if they hadn't survived, I would have had to have written about Clement Attlee and Wendell Willkie, and Clement and Wendell isn't quite as sexy. So all politics is local. Want to make sure in that package, this living history idea, that we're in some sense of defining patriotism, a sense of, and this will lead into the next thing, a sense of how people should think about patriotism. There's a great deal of debate now, obviously, about, is dissent patriotic? Is the idea that you can disagree with the president a patriotic act, or is it traitorous, as Dick Cheney would tell you, as he puts down his onion ring? So we want to look at that as closely as we can, because it is an evolving idea. And obviously in '07 and '08, I have a feeling that John McCain is going to be front and center as a presidential candidate. And he is someone who's thought a great deal about this, obviously. And so there'll be lots of voices in there, again, lots of interactive possibilities. The other idea that I've talked to Greg and Michelle about is this notion of, you may remember in the 1980s, there was this idea of cultural literacy. The idea that there are 100 things about geography or American history or economics or entertainment or religion that you had to know in order to be an educated American. And it caused a huge fight because obviously there's a great deal, what you choose to put on a list like that reflects your values and your experience, so everybody gets mad and argues about it. That's good for us. Having a food fight over that is a good thing. So this idea of what everybody should know, what every American should know, is something I'd like to try to do, partly because it works so well on the web. The quizzes, I understand you all did fairly well this morning. This is what Social Security was your Achilles heel, as it is the economies. Get ready. One of our best traffic items is just the quiz form, and this is a case where we can do that. We can have explainers. It's got a lot of possibilities, and it's an important thing at the moment in the education debate, because Margaret Spellings, who's the Secretary of Education, is trying to get across the idea that there should be a test at the end of your undergraduate experience to sort of see what you know, and that colleges would be accountable in the same way elementary and high schools are under No Child Left Behind to see what people actually know. And there was a funny piece in the Times this morning, I don't know if y'all got to it, about how high-ranking counterterrorism experts had no idea about the difference between a Sunni and a Shia, which gives one pause. But most people don't. And here's a case where, without wagging our finger, again, we can say, here are things you have to know as you go forward in a world in which different faiths and different cultures are hugely important to business, to war, to politics. We are moving the giving back to September. The idea being, those of you who are in New York know, because of the traffic, that the middle of September is when the UN General Assembly is here, is a hugely clogging but interesting moment in New York. Is a good moment for us to do something that is worthy that we might not do, say, in the middle of summer. Hunger, things we should do, and get some attention as those kinds of issues are being debated in the city. Also takes a little the pressure off of having to find Brad Pitt and Rick Warren every year, which is a good thing. Women in leadership, we remain committed to, absolutely, and will continue to try to make that as interesting as possible. It's getting trickier with the victims of our own success, I think, in terms of actual journalism in the magazine. How do you make people read these things can be tricky, but we'll get there. The other Beschloss item I should mention is Michael wants to become the Jack Kerouac of history travel. He wants to set up a program both with the Today Show and with us in Tip Sheet, where he explains where you should take your kids to learn about history on different trips. I told Michael I thought this was the most naked bid I'd ever seen, to have your expenses paid as he takes his kids around. But he will be great at that, and we're in conversations about when to start it. So he'll be good fun there. Is there anything I missed, you all? Greg, Michelle? Who's next? Who's next is next up. It's tricky. I like it. I think it's a defining franchise in what we've set up for years now of time looks back, we look forward. This year, I think, will probably be a political year because of the presidential race, which will begin in earnest on November 8th. We need to breathe some energy into it, brings a little more pizzazz. It's a difficult editorial call because you don't want to just completely throw people who no one's ever heard of into it. At the same time, you don't want it to be completely obvious. So we set ourselves about the hardest task we can possibly set. But we'll do it, and it'll be, I hope, my early candidate at the moment is Governor Romney. of Massachusetts, who is he's three interesting things. He's a Massachusetts Republican. There are only 6 of those. He's a Mormon, which is very, very interesting. And he's got really great hair. So that'll work well on the cover. He's got that over McCain, I must say. Just a final word, I'm thrilled to be doing this job. And grew up with Newsweek and Time coming into the house. And believe that we still have a very particular role in the life of the nation. We have to earn it, as I said. We can't take anything for granted. And if we act as though somehow or another we are unaccountable or live according to our own rules, then we're not going to do very well. But I think as we need to be responsive and both reflect what's going on and help guide it through very tumultuous times. It would surprise me very much, tragically, if we were all standing here 4 years from now and we had not had another attack on our soil. I think it is remarkable that, you don't often hear journalists say this, I think it's remarkable that the administration has kept that from happening yet, 5 years on. And so as we struggle to understand Islam, as we understand extremism, as we try to understand how do we run our economic lives in an interconnected world, but a world that's interconnected by violence as well as by commerce, is a rich moment for a place like this. And we'll do all we can to get it right. Thank you.
Turn itself into a Newsweek sort of format, getting the celebrities, etc. Have you read anything about that, or have any feelings about it?
What kind of celebrities?
Sort of like household names, turning our editors into celebrities is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, God help them if we're the model. Yes, they are. You know the history of this. Time for generations, literally, had a kind of institutional voice. That this was the voice that Britton Hayden and Henry Luce wanted it to have. Neither magazine had bylines, reporter authors' names on the stories until the 60s. Clearly, in a personality-driven universe, to be competitive, they need to create more faces that are more instantly recognizable as Time properties. My view of this, and you won't get a lot of mindless chest thumping out of me. It'll always be mindful when I do it. But the two best people they've got, it's sort of like the day-old bread, Joe Klein and Mike Elliott, both of them worked here. One of the things I do when I talk to people around the country about the magazine is, can you name anyone who writes for Time magazine? And no one can. Now, at the same time, I know that Time went through a number of focus groups in the past couple of years, and people have a very hard time telling us apart still. So I think they probably get some credit for our work. Clearly, you've seen in the past year or so, in the rise in the number of cover bylines, you've seen a kind of attempt at that. I don't think it's worked very well, but that doesn't mean it won't. I sometimes worry that we are at the top of a generational wave in that department, and they've been building for years, and that we're going to start inevitably declining like Rome as they go up. I'm sort of worried, but one of the reasons promoted Jonathan Darman to become the political correspondent was, he's a 25-year-old brilliant guy who will be, one of the next generation of stars. And so as long as you keep the farm team going, so to speak, I think we'll be all right. Can I get some water? Oh, thank you. Fresh water.
you looking for in this business editor?
Looking for the business editor. I should tell you all first, one of the reasons for if I sound odd, I've become addicted to Tylenol Cold. And so, it's just great, do you want to share? It's just great stuff. The business editor needs to be someone who can take this big hunk of talent we have. Roberts, Sloan, Samuelson, Quinn, McGinn, Naughton, Stone, and do more landmark packages. It's a great regret of mine in recent years that, for instance, Sloan almost always just writes a column. I mean, he's someone who can do fairly long-form investigative pieces that will get attention. And while I know that's not a direct, I suspect if you walked into a corporation and said, hey, I got a great idea, Alan Sloan's going to investigate somebody, they go, oh, right. Sign me up. Scratch and sniff. But here's how the covenant works, I think. In the same way the web makes us stronger in the magazine because we are flexing our muscles all week, and so we're quicker and we're smarter about what's going on. If you create a must-read area of coverage, if people know, particularly the CEOs of the world, know that every quarter Sloan or Newsweek's going to have a really good piece you got to read, then they begin to associate Newsweek with business coverage in a way that I don't think they do at the moment. And so what we need is a business editor who can package, who knows that we're not Fortune, we're not Forbes, we're not Business Week. Will really jump on news stories and push them ahead. I pushed this morning on reconstructing how did Walmart do this China deal, and what are the lessons of that for other companies going into China. So you need somebody who would have jumped on that yesterday and known what to do, and also appreciates the technology aspect of it. Sure.
John, would you imagine the Newsweek reader? What do you envision, and how does that impact your vision for that?
That's a very good question. I envision somebody who has read at least 3 editions of the New York Times, no matter where in the country. My wife and I have a little house in Tennessee, in Sewanee, Tennessee, where I went to school. Sewanee is sort of like Brideshead Revisited meets Deliverance. It's a very odd little place. It's this Gothic school next to the car-chopping county capital of America, Grundy County. So it's where I go to get my bearings on these things. And I think about those people because they get the New York Times at 7 a.m. now. They are often much better read on web content than I am, because I'm there not to do that. So I think about them as subscribers, as people who have to decide every year whether they're going to write that check. Are they going to be surprised enough on Tuesday after they've read 3 or 4 editions of the Times? And the impact it has on me is, I think of all sorts of different people of different ideological stripes, but who are essentially very well educated, prosperous, and skeptical.
John, you talked about being 24/7 on the web.
Yep.
Aside from what you're going to have in the magazine, how are you going to use the web? What are we going to be doing differently on the web? Are you going to be breaking more news on the web? Are you going to be doing, longer features, shorter features? What's the difference in your web strategy?
The difference is volume. The difference is, at the moment, it's volume. This is the Powell doctrine of web strategy, which is overwhelming force. Throw everything you've got at it and see what works. because I don't think anybody knows particularly what works, and you have to learn from experience. Will we break more news? I think so. We're having a debate today about, we have El Baradei, who's the head of the AEIE, whatever it is, the atomic energy inspectors, who've done a really great job, haven't they, around the world. Thank you, sir, for that. Chris Dickey went and saw him, interviewed him. El Baradei is like Alan Dershowitz. He's incapable of not having an unbroadcast thought. So inevitably, he's going to talk to somebody else before the end of the week. Old days, we would have held on to it and been beaten anyway. We'll post that. So that will be, and that'll be fairly well emailed, among those global readers. So that's news in that sense. If Isikoff comes in and says, I've got the president's girlfriend, it's going to be tough. I'm asked that question a lot on the journalistic side. People say, well, what's your philosophy about, what if I have our invasion plans for North Korea? I say, well, go get them, and then we'll have the argument. Instead of sitting here talking about it, why don't you go to the Pentagon and steal them? I don't care. Journalistic principles, it's like military intelligence is kind of a little bit of an oxymoron. At least journalistic philosophy on that side. If we think something's not going to hold, we're going to break it. No question. I want people, to answer you very seriously, I want people interested in the news to feel they have to come see us once a day on the web, just to see what Feynman might have, what Alter might have, what Sloan might have, what Hirsch might have. What's the story of the day that's kicking around that they're seeing at the office, when they get their Yahoo headlines or whatever. And they think, well, I want to get a Newsweek take on this. And I have a sense, and I don't know, y'all tell me, I have a sense that that's where we add value. It doesn't make any sense for us to try to be the Associated Press or MSNBC. We're talking about different things that get headlines so that we could be a one-stop shopping thing. Right now, at this hour, we're an added value stop in many ways. We've done much better, I think, we will do better. But in terms of changing the art head, changing the site to flow with the news, which we, for a long time, didn't do a very good job of. Our philosophy was, well, this is our cover story, we're a magazine, we're not a wire service, so we're not going to change it. We have thrown that out. If a story is big enough, that's what is on people's minds, and we have something to say, and my God, trust me, with our staff, we always have something to say. Whether it's worth listening to or not is a whole different matter. When the plane hit the building over here, we were up pretty fast. There are a couple of good examples the past week or two where we've just gone to it, and we wouldn't have done that before. So in an interesting way, as it says in Ecclesiastes, everything old is new again. We're all kind of back to basics here, back to journalism 101, which is break news, jump on a story. And what's news is what's happening now. And we have the means for the first time in our history of being smart about it and being on it all the time. As opposed to, for 70 years, we had to wait for the magazine. And now we don't have to. And what I'm trying to communicate to our folks is this is a great thing. This should be infectious. This should be wonderful because you now have this huge audience ready to hear what you have to say at any time, and we'll never kill anything for space. Although that happened to one guy once, and it was kind of embarrassing. Deirdre told him, we don't have space on the web. He's never recovered. So that's what I want to do. And it's really a case of, hey, let's put on a show. Let's just go do it.
international coverage now that you have NISID on board. I mean, in the recent past, most of the international stories running in the U.S. magazine are really only stories that relate to U.S. foreign policy, like Iraq and now North Korea, etc.
Yeah. Well, Newsweek International, we're going to beef up two answers. One is on the web, we're beefing up the Newsweek International web staff. I should also bury the lead to some extent. We are very close to hiring a deputy editor for DEPKI. That's a lot of DEPs. Say that fast, Haggerty. So that she's freer to go fight with Osberg, which seems everyone has the sitcom they want to write in their heads. The Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz of our time are Osberg and Depke. I never understood what they're fighting about, but it's great. Plants are flying, coffee cups, and it's great fun. Giving her someone who be someone that I trust to make editorial decisions about what to publish, because what goes up on the website is as much as part of Newsweek as the magazine. We are blessed, and knock on anything you can find, we have not made a mistake on the web. Unlike the Wall Street Journal, unlike the Washington Post, unlike the New York Times. Well, the New York Times does it cross-platform. But we haven't rushed something onto the web and regretted. And that's a great achievement, and it's Deirdre's achievement. And I value her and am deeply grateful for that. But she needs help. I mean, this is going to become a constant operation. So we'll have a deputy for her. We've already moved one senior editor over. We're about to move another one. So we get resources have to follow where the mission is. And right now we're like the French in 1940. We're set up to fight a great war that happened 23 years ago. We had 14 people at the web, I think, 2 months ago, and 159 or something at the magazine. That's just nuts. I mean, that's genuinely what the French would do, which God help us. So we are addressing that and will make that happen. It's kind of a rolling thing, but it'll be done by the end of the year. That will include a Newsweek International editor. Now, NISID and foreign coverage. I just want us to do a little more global business, and I think that it's hard because we have limited space, and we have not had a passionate advocate for that kind of coverage in the magazine. Jeff Bartholet, who's now the Washington bureau chief, who was the foreign editor, is a fantastic journalist, and he had on his watch 2 wars and a presidential campaign that was largely about terrorism. So it's understandable that the first thing that falls off the table is something like economics, particularly since there's a cultural division in our world between business coverage and foreign coverage. I think NISID will be very good at bridging that, and that's something we're going to push for. You want people to, again, I figure that a lot of people who read the magazine are very interested in those things. And that also means if they're very interested in them, that they read a lot of them. And so you can't do it badly. The worst thing in the world is a naive business story. It's dumber than a naive politics changes all the time. I mean, that's all right, and you can find people to argue things. But a naive business story, if you know anything about the subject and it feels dumb, makes the whole thing look dumb, the whole operation. So there's a pretty high bar there. But it's also very easy to go straight into the weeds about things. So a news magazine business story is one of the trickiest things to do. It's why I'm so delighted we have Johnny Roberts, who breaks news. We have Sloan, who, Sloan could read the phone book and people would pay to come listen to him. He's tried that, actually. Sam and Jane, people trust on this. I think that, depending on what's happening militarily and in Iraq, we'll have the resources to do a little broader coverage.
Do you see more of the coverage going into the national edition or running an enterprise?
Both.
And do you have any insights into how enterprise might change or grow?
I like it. Do y'all like it?
Okay.
Okay. If you can sell the stuff, we'll produce it. And there are lots of. We have tons of ideas, and we just need, when you're talking about a print project, you just need the space to do them, and there's enough lead time, and the people who work on it love it, which is always a good thing. No one's forced to do it. In a weird way, enterprise is sort of ahead of the web in some ways, like that with the staff. There's still a tiny bit of, well, if it's not good enough for the magazine, we'll put it on the web. Now, I've done everything I can to fix that in my 11-day reign. So check back with me on 16.
One of the things I try to do is grow the category we all do, bring in people advertising and news category that are not in it. And media director said to me, threw an objection at me that I couldn't answer, still can. He said, I'm not in the news category because it has no soul, it has no attitude, it has no point of view.
Does he read the magazine?
He reads them both. I mean, he says, and he said you can't, because what you do is report reality. So you can't have an attitude, you can't have point of view, or color reality. And he looks at this as a pipe into people. How do you address that?
Well, that's interesting. So he thinks we're just feeding information that is then put to some other use.
There's analysis of the information on the way, but it's cerebral. It's not. There's no passion. There's no point of view. There's no attitude.
Well, that's very depressing to hear. Thank you.
It was before your reign.
Oh yeah. That's interesting because you have to be passionate about it, or we could all be making more money doing something else. This week's magazine, for instance, which I'm looking at there, we wanted to tell the whole history of how these lunatics got the bomb. And we brought decades of reporting experience. I have 4 messages downstairs from the White House that thinks we had plenty of attitude in that story, and they didn't like it, if you want to tell him that. Put that in his pipe and put it in their heads. It's like the week that Roger Ailes of Fox News was quoted in the New Yorker saying that we're a handout from the DNC, and James Wolcott in Vanity Fair said that we're a blast fax from the Bush White House. I mean, you're doing something right. All I can say is that we'll try. I get what you mean about the soul point. Some of it depends on where you stand. If we are, for instance, the Bushies hate this because we're arguing that the Clintons were more or less on the right track with North Korean policy and it got knocked off under Bush. I think that's a legitimate argument. And to whom much is given, much is expected. Believe me, no one asked George Bush to be president. In fact, we had to count it a couple of times to get him there. So you got to be a big boy about these things. But if we're relentless about, say, what if we put Nancy Pelosi on the cover, God help us, and said, the loony left takes over. Is that soul and attitude? Yeah. Is it the right thing to do? No. But there are ways to mix that cocktail. And that's interesting because I sometimes worry we have too much attitude. So apparently this fellow, what does he work in? What is it?
Got more opinions than anyone ever met, so.
Okay. Well, offer him a my turn and see what happens. try. We'll try to be soulful and yet attitudinal.
How do you envision the Newsweek brand as a multimedia experience 5 or 10 years down the road?
If I knew that, I would be doing something else, I think, as well. I'd just be buying stocks. I think my best guess is the magazine is still the magazine. The web is, which is already, I mean, it's already, 10 million unique users versus 4.2. The web grows exponentially as the generation of people who have never heard of this thing called paper come up in terms of the 5-year plan. And as long as we report things and get them right, and people feel that they're, again, learning something that they need to know, that they want to know. Not that we're giving them homework, not that we're U.S. News, not that it's, staid pipe-like conveyor belt, to mix metaphors. But as long as we're a fun, and fun is a key word, as long as it's entertaining. Horace once said, the point of poetry is to delight and to instruct. Well, we instruct pretty well. We just have to delight more. And so I hope that people see Newsweek as, again, a one-stop website for news and analysis through the day, and that they want the magazine because the magazine tells them good stories, that breaks news like a daily, but does it with production values that are like a monthly. That's what's essentially happened to the cycle, is that dailies have become weeklies, weeklies have become monthlies, and monthlies have become quarterlies. So that's where we are, I think, in terms of the business. But I think people want, journalistically, but I think people will want, when you say Newsweek, they're going to think they understand the world, they understand politics, they're going to tell me things I need to know because I want to be part of a conversation that is informed and smart without being condescending.
A little bit better conversation the week pops up a little bit. I mean, what relevance, if any, do you guys look at it at all, or?
I look at it on Friday nights with the bourbon. I look at it. Now there's attitude. Maybe Opinion Man wants that. But they don't have any ads, do they? I mean, it's not very popular, is it? Is it?
It's growing.
Is it growing?
It's growing.
That's interesting. The Week is a little like The Economist in that it's very cleverly written. It's got a point of view. It's hard to know what the point of view is exactly, except we're smarter than you. And that's not really a very endurable point of view, I think, durable point of view. But there's no question that in the front of the book and in display type, in graphics, and things throughout the magazine, you want to have access points that are not unweek-like. People will be flipping through, see something that's funny, or a pull quote that's, about. There's one again this week where it turns out at one point the North Koreans went to a Hackensack restaurant, Rib Guy, to try to figure out how to reach the U.S. government. I mean, that's so you put that in a pull quote, and you hope people see it. So I think it's lessons to be learned there without going too far.
How about U.S. News?
Yeah.
What's your Whitaker always had his point of view as far as U.S. News, the magazine. How do you see it? It's still a competitor for us.
I know, it's too bad. Because I don't see it as one particularly, journalistically. I know a lot of people who work there. I admire them. They're good, hardworking people, but there's just a kind of lethargy. This is one case where the mean joke is right, snooze. And it's perfectly worthy there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, this goes to, you think we don't have soul? Tell that guy, Jesus. So, no, I don't. I would probably, this is an interesting question, would we do a cover if they had just done the same thing? Probably not. But sometimes I don't see it for a while. So it's not as though it hits my desk and I'm worried. So. Last one, anything? Mr. Osberg?
I think these were easy questions. You guys have any tough questions for John?
What's a kudzu?
So hard to deal with you people up here. I've been trying to get, I have this horrible experience. I had a meeting at Sewanee right after our college issue, which we mentioned every college in America except mine. And so they said, how could you do this? And I said, well, when we do the new kudzus, we're going to be all over that list. The Kudzu League is going to be a big thing for us. Well, thank you all. Again, thank you for what you do. Let us know what we can do to make it easy. We're on the same team. Thank you.
About our future and yours. And we're going to take a break, right?
Yep, and then we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Back in 10 minutes. Thank you.